About the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Wednesday night edition, Air Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Air Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Matt, does the mic sound okay? Right as we were going live on air, everything went off, but hope everybody's having a great day. You can see I am back from Circa, but boy, oh boy, we got a lot to talk about today. Wednesday's kind of moving day, especially for bubble teams here. So we got a lot of college hoops, right? Wednesday's moving day for all these bubble teams. By the way, you know what? I'm just going to start this over because 3, 2, 1. Welcome in, everybody. Wednesday night edition, Air Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Air Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. You can see I am back here in Los Angeles. I was in Nashville, the Nashville area. We were at the Circa Sportsbook the last 2 days. But I'll tell you what, I came back Wednesday, a huge moving day. Listen, Thursday is when all the big teams kind of come on, the Big 12, the ACC, the Big East, all those teams that we've been watching all year. Wednesday was a really important day, and we got a lot to react to, okay? So first of all, bubble teams. Does anyone want to make the NCAA tournament? Because a bunch of bubble teams lost. Only producer Matt's Auburn Tigers seemed to figure things out on Wednesday. We'll discuss that. From there, we will discuss a little bit about this wild story. Will Wade, could he be headed back to LSU? I think he might be. We'll discuss that. And then we will wrap some more coaching carousel stuff. Syracuse, a program that I have followed as closely as any, being an old Big East school. They need a new head coach. What happens there? Maybe a little on Arizona State and some of these other jobs that have opened up. So everybody come on in. The rare night episode of the Aaron Torres pod, I should mention, we'll be live back around this time tomorrow to recap a busy Wednesday or Thursday in college hoops. So we really do appreciate your support. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. First of all, make sure you're subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. We really do appreciate your support. We also appreciate your support if you listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You know who else's support we appreciate? Our friends and our hotel and casino partners, the folks at Circa Sportsbook, okay? So obviously we've told you a million times, if you're in Vegas, best place to watch games is at the Circa Sportsbook on Fremont Street. But we also know a lot of you can't get to Vegas, and guess what? What you're seeing right there, the brand new sportsbook, Mint, Kentucky, Downs, Franklin, Kentucky, and I should mention, this is where we were the last 3 days. This is where I woke up this morning, and I got to say this, we did our Tuesday night event. And I do just want to thank everybody for coming out. We had a blast. We watched a lot of college hoops. We had some beverages. We drank. We had some Auburn fans. We had some Arizona fans. We had some Kentucky fans. To everybody who came on out, we really do appreciate your support. We got some pictures. There were some people that came out that we didn't necessarily get pictures with, but we had a blast. We watched ball. We ate pizza. We had some drinks. So thank you. And what I will say, I think everybody that did show up was blown away by just how beautiful this new Circa Sportsbook is. You can see it there. And I'm just here to tell you, if you need a place to watch games for March Madness, if you need a place to hang out with your buddies, you're going to want to check out this brand new sportsbook, Mint, Kentucky Downs, 35 minutes door-to-door from Nashville, 20 minutes from Bowling Green. And listen, like I said, I had so much reaction from so many people talking about how awesome this place was. And so, again, make sure to check it out yourself if you need a place to watch some games this March. The brand new Circa Sportsbook at Mint, Kentucky Downs. With that said, it was a busy, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. It was a busy Wednesday in the world of sports. No more time to waste. Let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, listen, like I said, Wednesday, college hoops, conference tournaments. It's kind of moving day in this new world that we live in. I remember, 7, 8, 10 years ago, Nobody played on Wednesday, but with these expanded tournaments, you had 4 games in the SEC, a bunch of games in the Big Ten and the ACC and whatever. And we had some really consequential results. So first of all, we're going to get to the bubble situation in a minute. But before we get to the bubble, I do very quickly want to talk about some of the other results that I thought were noteworthy, because I did think there were, in fact, quite a few noteworthy results from Wednesday in college hoops that had nothing to do with the bubble. The first one, I just want to give a half a second of credit to BYU. Okay, so BYU is a team that we have talked about a lot on this show. They obviously had so much preseason hype, 6 season-ending injuries. And as the season wore down, you could see them wearing down as a team. They had a couple bad losses at Cincinnati, at West Virginia last week, but they beat Texas Tech at home on senior night. And I said, this is not a team that you're going to want to see this postseason, because, yes, over a 30-game season, when you have 6 season-ending injuries, are you going to wear down? Absolutely. But is this a team that if you catch them on the wrong night with the potential number 1 pick in the draft on their roster, could you be in trouble? Yeah. Well, Tuesday night, while we were at the Mint, A.J. DeBonsa went for 40. By the way, A.J. DeBonsa's 40 was way more impressive than Bam Adebayo's 83. I had a reaction on Instagram that you'll like if you weren't impressed by Bam Adebayo. But I bring it up because A.J. DeBonsa goes for 40 on Tuesday night. BYU beats Kansas State. They advance to Wednesday. And I'll tell you what, a West Virginia team that was probably 1 win away from serious bubble consideration, no more, as BYU gets the win 68-48. And I'm just telling you, don't let this team get hot. First of all, A.J. DeBonsa is so unbelievable. 27 points in this game. He set a 2-game record for the most points in the first 2 games of a Big 12 tournament, with, obviously, you do the math, 67 points in those 2 games. So he's averaging like 33.5 per game through 2 games. I think what's interesting about BYU, though, is a couple other things. Is one, you look at them, and yes, you don't want the injuries that BYU has had. We all understand that. But what I would say, and what does stand out to me, is the fact that I do believe that as these injuries have mounted, it has led to other guys having no choice but to step up. Kennard Davis is a guy that all season long you've been waiting for. Can he put it together? Can he figure it out? He played quite literally his best game as a BYU Cougar on Wednesday night against West Virginia. 20 points in this game on 7 of 11 shooting, 5 of 6 from 3. He was a guy that all year long you were waiting for that kind of performance. He has it. Again, DeBonsa plays well. Dominique Diamande is a guy that I think there was a lot of excitement for in the summer. It never really clicked. He's played well. Kadeem Boop, 0.7 rebounds. He does the Kadeem Boop thing. And I'm just here to tell you, we don't have to overanalyze it, but what I am here to say is that if you, all I'm saying is, imagine being, BYU is probably going to be a 6 seed at this point. Imagine being a 3 seed, working all year to put yourself in position to basically be somewhere between a top 10 and top 12 team, and having to see A.J. DeBonsa and BYU in the second round of the tournament. I really do believe this BYU team is dangerous. Now, they play Houston on Thursday night. All my days are so confused. I started the day at Mint Kentucky Downs in Franklin, Kentucky. So forgive me, my days are confused. But Thursday they will play Houston. It's going to be a tough game. I'll be honest. BYU is in the NCAA tournament. I don't even know if they necessarily want to win that game. They need to get home and get some rest. But I'm just telling you, imagine being the team that gets the 3 seed and gets A.J. DeBonsa potentially in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Only other game that really had no bubble implications that caught my attention was Kentucky taking care of business against LSU. First game in Nashville. Final score in this one, 87-82. Listen, we're not going to overreact, but one, I do think whenever you talk about a game like this, it's always worth talking about what the opposite spectrum could be, right? Imagine if Kentucky had lost this game. Imagine what the conversation would be about Kentucky, who obviously struggled down the stretch, who obviously was not playing well, who obviously really, really, really needed some sort of just positivity going into the NCAA tournament. Kentucky is very comfortably in. but lost 5 of 7 down the stretch. There was the ugly loss to Texas A&M at this time last week. There was the ugly loss to Florida over the weekend. They were potentially in position to get the 4 seed and the double bye till Friday. They had to play on Wednesday in the opening game. They get the victory. Otega Owe was awesome as always. Brandon Garrison, I think you can argue 17 points, a couple 3-pointers, maybe his best game as a Kentucky Wildcat. And so I just bring it up to very simply say that to me, this was a game that you simply could not lose. Kentucky does not lose. And I'll tell you this, it sets up a very interesting scenario. They play the opener again on Thursday. Missouri, we're going to transition to the bubble here in half a second. Missouri needs a win to stay comfortably in the NCAA tournament. I actually think that's going to be one of the more interesting games from Thursday. Oh, by the way, with LSU, this is kind of an interesting thing. Matt McMahon loses. 16 seed LSU is out. It's not official yet. I think Matt McMahon is done at LSU. And in just a few minutes, we're going to talk about a very interesting hypothetical on who could replace him. What I want to do is switch gears now because, like I said, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's a lot of bubble teams. It's a lot of teams playing for their lives. Thursday, we're going to get, in the Big 12 tournament, Kansas is back, Arizona's back, Texas Tech, Houston. Big East gets UConn, St. John's, the whatever. You get the point. ACC, Duke, Carolina, all those schools tip off. It was a very interesting day on the bubble, though. And what becomes increasingly interesting about this year's bubble, nobody seems to want to play in the NCAA tournament because it is wild to see the number of teams that have a chance to get 1 win, 2 wins, and just punch their ticket and not have to sweat. And no one can seem to do it. We had a couple results from Tuesday we'll kind of, work in here, but let's focus on Wednesday. The only bubble team that seemed to have any success was the one team that nobody wants to see in. Cover your ears, producer Matt, but give credit to Stephen Pearl and the Auburn Tigers, really the only bubble team that gets a noteworthy win. They beat Mississippi State 79-61. Now, transparently, when I say noteworthy, that doesn't mean that it's an amazing win that is going to boost their resume. But one, obviously, if you lost this game, your season is essentially over. I still think Auburn has to beat Tennessee on Thursday, and I guess it would be not the quarterfinals. It would be the second round, third round, whatever it is. I can't even figure out these brackets anymore. Listen, I think Auburn has to beat Tennessee to make the NCAA tournament. But I do think if they do beat Tennessee, even with the totality of the losses, and especially with everything else that has happened over the last couple of days, I think Auburn is going to get in. I really think it's a win and you're in, lose and you're out. I know everybody is looking at the 15 losses. It will almost certainly be 16 before the end of the SEC tournament. If it's not 16, they're going to get the automatic bid. But you also have to look at the wins. We know they played the toughest schedule in college basketball, but they won at Florida. That might be the best win in college basketball. They won against St. John's on a neutral. They beat Arkansas. They beat Kentucky. They're not, some of them aren't great wins, but relative to what a lot of other teams on the bubble have done, I think we do have to give Auburn the benefit of the doubt. If they had lost, the season would have been over. They survive another day, but we're going to do another show around this time tomorrow. And I'll tell you what, if they don't take care of business against Tennessee tomorrow, I think it will be hard for me to see the scenario where they are in the NCAA tournament, but we got to give credit where it's due. We're not going to be, we're going to be critical when it's fair, but uncritical when it's not fair. And so I just bring it up. We got to give Auburn credit because they get the win on Wednesday in their SEC opener. As far as teams that lost noteworthy bubble games, how about just about everybody else in major college basketball? Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the rest of the bubble teams that were on the wrong side of the bubble. And let's stay in the SEC, a game that just went final right before we got on air. Texas playing against Ole Miss. Final score in this one, Ole Miss 76, Texas 66. And if you listen to our conference tournament preview show on Monday, I guess it was, again, my days are all confused, I said, listen, Chris Beard, it's been a bad year. Things haven't gone well. The one thing I know about Chris Beard, you put him in position to potentially beat Texas and potentially eliminate them from the NCAA tournament, Chris Beard is going to take full advantage, and that is exactly what happens. So Texas came into the day last 4 byes, so essentially the next 4 in, one of the final 8 teams, and now they are reeling and they are very much on the bubble, and they are now going home and sweating until Selection Sunday. Listen, they have some really good wins. There were moments in time where it felt like they were playing really well. It doesn't change the fact that they were kind of a train wreck down the stretch. Texas loses 5 of its final 6. And again, a couple really bad losses when you factor in that, again, Ole Miss finished obviously towards the bottom of the SEC standings. They also lost to an Oklahoma team that's on the wrong side of the bubble right now. So Texas, again, this was just a game you had to have. You could not afford to lose it. I think if I was guessing, I would predict Texas is in Dayton, and that's assuming we have nothing crazy happen in any of these other tournaments, no bid stealing in the A10 and wherever. Texas, not the win that you want. One other noteworthy game from the SEC, it is actually in progress. Listen, we weren't going to start this show at midnight Eastern, but Oklahoma has played itself back into the bubble picture. They're up 10 with 13 minutes to go against South Carolina. Oklahoma needs to win this game, and I think they probably need to win again tomorrow against Texas A&M to be in. But it is worth noting, on a day where pretty much everybody else lost, Oklahoma is in good shape. Maybe we update that score by the end of the day, by the end of the show. But Oklahoma is in good position, which you can't say for much of the rest of the bubble picture. So outside of Texas losing, outside of Auburn winning, let's get to the rest of that bubble picture because it was a disaster. Let's now switch gears to the ACC, where SMU faces Louisville. SMU was actually sort of in control for most of this game. I got home. I actually watched a lot of it on the plane, got home to watch about the final 10 minutes, and SMU takes the loss. SMU coming into the day was one of the last 4 in. I think this game would have punched their NCAA tournament ticket. They can't quite close out Louisville. It was the 3rd time these teams played. They're actually pretty evenly matched. Louisville took the first game in Louisville. SMU took the second game in Dallas. Louisville gets the victory here. For SMU, man, listen, I've said a lot of nice things about Andy Enfield because I believe he's a good coach. And it is worth noting, and I think this is something the committee will factor in. Down the stretch, they struggled, but they were also without third leading scorer BJ Edwards, who is one of the better players on that roster and really kind of one of the key players in all of the ACC. It doesn't change the fact, though, that like so many of these bubble teams, when we're talking about SMU, they struggled down the stretch. They lost at Syracuse late in the season. They lost at Florida State. You win any of these games that you have to win when you're in that position, we're not even talking about you like this. Instead, they don't get the win. They're going to be sweating until Selection Sunday. As I said, they were part of Joe Lunardi's last 4 in. I think they would have been in with a loss to with a win over Louisville. They don't get it. Speaking of right on the cusp, speaking of the ACC, Cal was in the next 4 hours. Remember, Cal is an ACC school, that beautiful Atlantic Coast school that we know and we love, the University of Cal Berkeley, okay? Cal, same story as SMU. They were in total control of their destiny about midway through the ACC schedule. They were 17-6 at one point. They finished 21-11. I'm not great at math, but that means that they finished 4-5 down the stretch, and they took some really bad losses. At Syracuse, really bad loss. Versus Pitt, really bad loss. At Wake Forest, really bad loss. And Florida State, which to its credit played better down the stretch. Listen, that's a game you have to have if you want to make the NCAA tournament. And so we're not going to go through everybody's resume today, but you want to get to the NCAA tournament, you got to beat somebody at some point, and Cal had so many chances down the stretch, took so many bad losses. I think they're out. I think they're out because I think it's Wednesday, it's early in the week, and so many more teams are going to have chances to pick up victories. Missouri plays on whatever day it is, Thursday. Seton Hall plays on Thursday. Kentucky's in the tournament, but A&M can solidify their spot. Oklahoma's still playing. So you just go through all of the teams that still have chances to pick up wins. I think Cal's out. By the way, I should mention on Tuesday, Stanford played. By the way, I'll say this. Stanford and Cal got kind of screwed by the ACC. I am not a fan of the fact that they had to play the final week of the season on the road. They basically probably got to the East Coast last Tuesday or Wednesday. They had to stay for the ACC tournament. It's not an excuse, though. Stanford lost at the buzzer against Pitt. Now, Stanford actually has a pretty compelling resume because they have some really good wins. They beat Louisville at home. They beat UNC at home. You go on and see what they did over the course of the season. You look at the fact that they beat St. Louis, which is 27-4. They beat NC State on the road. I really think a win over Pitt the other day would have put them in. They do not. And so Stanford, Cal, probably both on the wrong side of the bubble. Both of them needed a win at the ACC tournament. Neither takes it. Let's keep it going. I think you can argue the most crippling bubble loss because of how the game played out. Cincinnati losing by 1 in overtime to UCF. Now, UCF kind of fell back to the bubble because they struggled late, but Cincinnati, okay? So we gave them all this credit because they beat Kansas late in the season. They destroyed BYU in the final week of the season, and you felt like they finally had some great momentum. They were up 12 points in this game against UCF in complete control and melted down late, including, by the way, one of the worst final possessions that I have ever seen. So it's a tie game. They get the ball back, and I'm not even somebody that necessarily loves when coaches call timeouts because I think sometimes coaches want to overcoach in that situation. Wes Miller lets them play. They do nothing until there's 0.8 seconds left. Wes Miller finally has to call a timeout when he realizes we have a second left. We're not even going to get a shot off here. And so they call the timeout. They don't get the shot off. They get a shot off, but it's not a good one. Go to overtime. They lose by 1. They're out of the NCAA tournament. They had to win today, and I think even probably another one to feel good. Cincinnati's out. I think Wes Miller, their head coach, is out as well. Now, it's worth noting they have some really good players on that roster. Mustafa Thiam, who obviously was phenomenal in this game, was great down the stretch. If he goes into the portal, oh boy, you're talking about maybe the best player in the portal. He finished today's game with 18 points, 16 rebounds, and 5 blocks. So that's a name worth noting if you're into the portal stuff. I also mentioned this the other day. If you're looking for a GM, Corey Evans is Cincinnati's GM, came from the Oklahoma City Thunder, was a longtime recruiting guy, a guy that I have a great deal of respect for. He did his job. He brought the talent into Cincinnati. Wes Miller did not coach it up very well. And so I only bring it up to say I know Kentucky is one of many schools that's looking for a GM. I said it a few weeks ago. That's the guy that Kentucky should call. I don't know if they will. I know Mark Pope, they're on the verge of hiring a front office guy. I don't think it's the final GM that they need or want. But Cincinnati, I think, is on the outside looking in of the NCAA tournament. UCF, by the way, probably pretty much punches a ticket, so good for them. Let's keep it going. Final few news and notes from Wednesday. Indiana. Listen, did Indiana have to sell its athletic soul for Kurt Cinetti? I mean, Indiana, the Darren DeVree experience, listen, I'm not going to write it off, but I'd say it's largely pretty forgettable as Indiana loses to Northwestern. How about this? The second time in a week 2 weeks that they've lost to Northwestern, the 7th straight time that Indiana freaking basketball lost to Northwestern. That is a mind-boggling stat to me, and it just shows you how far this program has fallen. Indiana now 18-14. You talk about Joe Lunardi. And by the way, people are going to say, why are you using Joe Lunardi's bracket? He's not even the best. Listen, I'm just, for simplicity's sake, we're using Joe Lunardi. Indiana was in the first 4 out before they even played on Wednesday. I'm guessing losing to Northwestern probably doesn't help. So Indiana, in my opinion, very much out of the NCAA tournament picture. I don't know where we're going to find all these bubble teams because you just start talking about some of these teams, and I don't know where we're going to find all these teams. Some of these teams that lost today are going to get just because there's not enough good teams outside of them. But it is interesting. It is noteworthy. A lot of teams taking losses today. I think Central Florida officially punched their ticket. NC State was maybe a tiny bit on the bubble. They might have been sweating if they lost today, but I think they're in. Missouri is probably the noteworthy one on Thursday. If they beat Kentucky, I think they're pretty much in. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we do, I mentioned NC State getting the nice win. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and talk about a very interesting story that emerged over the last couple of days, okay? So LSU loses to Kentucky. Matt McMahon, I have to assume, is going to be gone. Is Will Wade ready to go back to LSU to replace him? Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, you know what we got to do. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to go ahead and thank Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Yeah, you see the logo on the back of the screen right here. Okay, so I've told you all about Collie Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge sports fan. And one day he was sitting on the couch and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something my kids are going to love, something my family's going to love, something I'm going to love. And so he came up with Collie Puffs. This is the new age health food snack. You don't need to go to the grocery aisle and buy all that crap, the Doritos, the Fritos. No, my friends, you need Collie Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But here's the best part. They taste freaking delicious. Actually, there's another best part. In addition to tasting delicious, in addition to being healthy, they are also taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Okay, so check this out. All you got to do is go to ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com, ColliePuffs.com, and you can get 15% off any purchase with the promo code Torres. That's Torres, Torres. It's that simple. 15% off any purchase. One bag to try them out, 100 bags to cater a party. Doesn't really matter. Promo code Torres. ColliePuffs.com gets you 15% off. Collie Puffs also available on Amazon. You obviously can't get the promo code there, but ColliePuffs.com, ColliePuffs.com, promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. Thank you to our friends at Collie Puffs. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Matt, really quick, anything interesting in the chat? I've been ignoring the chat. I don't know if there's anything noteworthy. It looks like Pam's starting some trouble. I heard if Missouri spelled, Pam, you spelled Missouri wrong, but she says if Missouri loses, they are not in the big dance. The only thing I'll say, like, who else are you going to put in? If Missouri loses to Kentucky, that is probably the noteworthy game from Thursday as far as the bubble is concerned. I think Auburn, Tennessee is obviously the other one. But most of the teams that entered this week on the bubble all lost. They all lost here on Tuesday or Wednesday, excuse me. You know who it actually benefited? Benefited one of the teams that didn't play like Missouri, but two, some of those mid-major schools. I think a lot of us, Miami of Ohio, I think they're in. I think even if they lose their opener, they don't have to sweat it. But the Mountain West has a couple teams, New Mexico, San Diego State on the bubble. I think this helps them. VCU, if they don't win the A-10, is on the bubble. I think this helps them. But Missouri probably with the biggest game on Thursday. They have the early opener against Kentucky. Speaking of which, if anybody wants to go to that game, you're going to need tickets. Well, guess what? You know where to get tickets? Our friends and our ticketing partners, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is America's #1 ticketing app. Over 28 million downloads. And what I love about SeatGeek is two things. One, everything on the app is laid out for you so you know if you're buying a good ticket or not, right? Every ticket rated 1 through 10 with a green dot or a red dot. Green dot means go ahead and purchase. Red dot means stay away. But what I really love about SeatGeek, you already know. They take care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. If you want to go to the Big East tournament this week, the SEC tournament, the ACC tournament, the A-10 tournament, whatever, go to SeatGeek, use promo code Torres. You get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek app, promo code Torres, $20 off your first purchase, any ticket on the app. Now, most of you are probably going to use it for college basketball. You're a Kentucky or Missouri fan. You want to go to the game on Thursday. But also, remember, again, any conference tournament, also concert shows, use SeatGeek, promo code Torres. It gets you $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's keep the show going. And I will tell you this, is that as these conference tournaments wrap up, we're going to start to see some coaching stuff kind of come about, okay? And so, for example, on Wednesday, Arizona State loses. The Bobby Hurley era is done. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Syracuse loses. Red Autry is out. We'll talk about that. Well, LSU lost on Wednesday. And I will say, as we record here, it is what, Matt? It is 11:17 Eastern, 10:17 Central Time, PM, of course. LSU lost in the morning. Matt McMahon, as best I can tell, has not been fired. I think that changes. 4 years, 3 losing seasons, and what is especially noteworthy about Matt McMahon, finished in last place in the SEC. Remember, last year, many in Louisiana, including one very prominent person who we're going to talk about in a minute, wanted him out last year. The AD at the time, Scott Woodward, gave him a bunch of money, so he has had every chance, every opportunity, and I think he will be gone. Well, I bring it up because over the last couple days, there has certainly been an interesting name that has emerged as a potential replacement for Matt McMahon. Could the man you see on that screen right there, Will Wade, come back as LSU head coach? It sounds crazy, but there are some very interesting things that have emerged over the last couple days. Okay, so first of all, let me tell you this. Listen, there's an old saying, I'm in the media, right? And maybe you like me, maybe you don't, maybe you think I'm good, maybe you don't think I'm good, whatever. One thing about what we do, though, is, you hear all sorts of stuff and you kind of have to vet what's true and what's not. And I will tell you, probably about 2 months ago, when it was clear LSU was not going to have the kind of season that they needed for Matt McMahon to keep his job, I started getting DMs and I started getting calls and I started getting questions. Torres, you hearing Will Wade back to LSU? And at first I dismissed it. And then I kept hearing it and I kept hearing it and I kept hearing it. And by the way, this isn't to debate which job is better. This isn't to debate what I would do if I was Will Wade. And also, while we're here, let me say, yes, I've had Will Wade on this show before. No, I have never asked him about returning to LSU. Haven't really talked to him since the season started. He's doing his own thing. I'm doing mine. So I'm not helping him. He's not helping me. I am just telling you what I have heard and what I think and what the reports hypothetically are coming out over these last couple of days. So let's get to the report. Now, it is worth noting, as always, and I always say it, anything behind a paywall, we don't share, right? So we don't share news that's behind a paywall. We want everybody to pay for, good journalism, this and that. But there was a report on Tuesday. What was it, Matt? Was it tigerbait.com? I don't know. You could pop up the tweet that I sent you. Was it tigerbait? Tigerbait.com. I got it right. There's Tiger Bait and there's Tiger Droppings. I get those two confused all the time. Those are both LSU message boards, by the way. Mike Scarborough tweeted what I'm hearing. The LSU Will Wade situation is no longer impossible. The LSU basketball situation has felt like a foregone conclusion for weeks, referencing Matt McMahon being fired. According to Mike Scarborough, recent developments and shifting conversations behind the scenes suggest the story may not be finished yet. Here's the latest from sources on where things are headed. And so what I want to do is I want to break it down. I want to give you some information. And again, I'm not telling you what I think Will Wade should do. I'm just telling you what I've heard and the context that you need to know. And I'll tell you this. Let's dive into the possibility of Will Wade returning, because I'll say this. Like I said, you can like me, you cannot like me, get stuff wrong all the time. But I will say one thing. This is one of those situations where me covering both college basketball and college football, I think really comes in handy, because transparently, I just think I know a lot about this that maybe the average college basketball reporter who doesn't cover college football knows, okay? And so for me, this story really goes back to the day that Will Wade was fired at LSU. First of all, Will Wade fired in 2022, as you can see on the screen. The season was not over yet. And I know if you're not a diehard LSU fan, a lot of the details are probably murky, right? But you have the FBI investigation that starts in 2019. LSU wins the 2019 SEC title. The investigation, NCAA, ongoing. And at the time, the AD was named Scott Woodward, and it was pretty well known that Scott Woodward and Will Wade did not get along. And Scott Woodward pulled the plug on the Will Wade era in 2022. And so even when that happened, it is worth noting that there was a large contingent of LSU fans that were not happy about it, because whatever you think about Will Wade, that dude wins everywhere, wins a lot, and wins quickly. NC State's going to the tournament. By the way, McNeese clinched a third straight NCAA tournament on Wednesday, so congrats to them. But LSU, you take out the 2020 tournament that got canceled, LSU made 4 straight NCAA tournaments in Will Wade's last 4 years. It would have been 5 for 5. And so this was just one of the more successful eras of LSU basketball. So nobody ever wanted him fired except for the AD. And to bring it full circle and to bring it as to why it could make sense right now, there are some very interesting politics behind the scenes going on in LSU, okay? So the AD that fired Will Wade in 2022 is gone. His name was Scott Woodward. You're probably wondering, oh, I think I know that name. When did he get fired? What was the circumstances around it? It was the craziness around Brian Kelly. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to, what was it, October of this year. LSU in football now gets destroyed on a Saturday night at home against Texas A&M. And you can just tell this Brian Kelly LSU thing, it's not working out. The governor that night was tweeting about it. He wasn't happy. The next day, I remember I was out for a family member's birthday dinner, and you start hearing things like, oh, Brian Kelly and Scott Woodward, this was just a few months ago. Brian Kelly and Scott Woodward, something isn't adding up here. It's not going well. And what we found out at the time was that Scott Woodward told Brian Kelly, you need to fire your offensive coordinator or you're gone. Brian Kelly refused. Brian Kelly then gets fired by Scott Woodward. So it's this big mess. It's embarrassing on a national scale. You have the buyout stuff with Brian Kelly. But I bring it up because this was when the governor got involved, okay? And if you remember at the time, and this all comes back to Will Wade, trust me, just work with me here. But if you remember at the time, the governor, he's pissed off because this is the state flagship university that just got embarrassed on the football field. Then he finds out that Brian Kelly's owed $50 million to go away. So the governor starts doing this rant about these contracts are ridiculous, blah, 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 this and that. But then he does the press conference. Do you remember what he said? They are asked before Scott Woodward was fired, will he be allowed to hire the next football coach? This was at like some random press conference that had nothing to do with LSU football. Here was the Louisiana governor being asked if Scott Woodward, the then AD, would be allowed to hire Brian Kelly's replacement as a football coach.
To foot the bill. So, yeah, I absolutely. Who's that? No. I can tell you right now, Scott Woodward is not selecting the next coach. Hell, I'll let Donald Trump select it before I let him do it. I don't know, but the Board of Supervisors is going to come up with a committee, and they're going to go find us a coach.
I would let Donald Trump hire my football coach before I would let Scott Woodward do it. Well, Scott Woodward gets fired just a few days later. And so, again, what does this have to do with Will Wade? Well, listen, at the time, there was all this reporting. And again, you have to follow college football and be a little bit of a college football sicko to know what happened. But Ross Dellinger, I remember it like it was yesterday, puts out this big, long article all behind the scenes. Ross is great at what he does. And there's an interesting note in that article. The article is about Scott Woodward, about LSU football's downfall. But the question becomes, why did the AD and Scott Woodward not get along? Well, it started last spring when the governor wanted Matt McMahon fired, and you can guess who the governor wanted as LSU's next head coach. Matt, if you have the excerpt from the Ross Dellinger article, I would love it. So this is from Ross Dellinger, I want to say mid-October. This is a Ross Dellinger Yahoo Sports article. For years, Landry, the governor's named Jeff Landry, had a front row seat to LSU athletics from his perch from the Louisiana Capitol, a building that sits about 3 miles north of campus. This includes the 5-year run of men's basketball coach Will Wade, who won 105 games from 2017 to 2022, took the Tigers to more NCAA tournaments, 3, than they had in the previous decade, and eventually found himself in the crosshairs of an NCAA investigation. Woodward fired him. Wade's coaching rehabilitation tour began just down the road from Baton Rouge a year later when he proceeded to win 50 games in 2 seasons at McNeese State in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Last spring, as LSU completed a dismal season under third-year head coach Matt McMahon, Jeff Landry had an idea: hire back Wade. He urged Scott Woodward and administrators to do so. Quote, Scott refused to do it, said a person with knowledge of the situation. So, you want to talk about high-level politicking? You want to talk about having friends in high places? Garth Brooks never wrote that song, Friends in High Places. Talk about friends in low places. Okay. Will Wade's got those too, but he's got some friends in high places. And so literally the governor and the former LSU AD didn't get along because the governor a year ago was trying to place Will Wade as the LSU head coach. So it did not happen. The governor sees an opportunity to get rid of the AD last year and bring in a new AD. And so now when people are saying there's no way Will Wade is going back to LSU, well, guess what? The governor clearly wants it. And when the governor clearly wants it, you can see the pathway where there would be support to do it, especially because the AD that fired Will Wade is no longer there. And so I just bring it up. There is legs to this story. Listen, I don't know what Will Wade is going to do. If he was advising, this is going to make me unpopular. If he was advising me, unless there's something going on at NC State that I don't know about, I would say stay at NC State. But he's not asking me. It's not my business. Clearly he feels like if he's considering the job, he feels like he has unfinished business there. Now, I think what becomes interesting about this whole thing is the financials behind it. And this is where, to me, the story gets truly fascinating, right? Because I think you look at it, I think you sit there and I think you say, okay, can LSU pull this off? Even if Will Wade wants to come back, what are the financials behind it? Because we know in college football in 2026, in college basketball in 2026, all that matters is what is the money to buy guys out and bring them back and do this and do that. And it leads, every decision is based on buyout money, right? And so I bring it up. My buddy Corey Smith, NC State writer, I think he's the best writer going on NC State, put out a very interesting tweet on Tuesday as these rumors ramped up. He put out a tweet that said, quote, just so we're clear, LSU would have to pay $15.3 million just to sit at the table to have talks with Will Wade, a $10.3 million buyout for Matt McMahon. That's a lot of money. $5 million to NC State. So in other words, not to hire Will Wade, but just to get to the conversation, you would have to fire Matt McMahon and buy him out $10.5 million basically. And then it's a $5 million buyout to get Will Wade out of his contract at LSU. And so I just bring it up because that is a lot of money. And then, oh, by the way, you're going to have to pay Will Wade probably $5 million a year to be your coach. You're going to have to pay assistant coaches, this, that, the other thing. And so it becomes a very expensive proposition. And I think you can look at that in one of two ways. On the one hand, it's like $20 million for a basketball coach is an awful lot of money, right? You know, we hear about buyouts of $2 million, $3 million, $5 million. Sometimes in this NIL era, what we're seeing a lot of is schools that are prioritizing football. They'll just punt on basketball for a year or two, right? Arizona State, basically, we're going to talk about Arizona State in a minute. They just kept Bobby Hurley for another year because they're like, we're not going to pay you $2 million in a buyout when that could go to our football team, which is actually pretty decent. And so you look at LSU that you could easily sit there and say, think about how much they spent on football over the last year. 50 plus million on a Brian Kelly buyout. Now, I know it's not all owed to him in one day, but that is a big chunk of money to a dude who is not going to be coaching football next year. Lane Kiffin signed a contract, $13 million a year, $91 million guaranteed. So $13 million just for Lane Kiffin, plus what you owe Brian Kelly. Oh, by the way, it's pretty well known. LSU football is a roster that is approaching about $40 million for next year. We know that football rosters on the high end are at $40 million. We think Texas is there, maybe Texas Tech, maybe Texas A&M. LSU, it's well known, has a $40 million roster. So you're talking about quite literally when you factor in Brian Kelly's buyout, Lane Kiffin's fully guaranteed contract, this year's football roster, assistant coach, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars for football. And so do you want to spend another $20 million on basketball? I don't know. The counter to it that I would say, though, is you just spent hundreds of millions on football. Is another $20 million to get the most beloved basketball coach of the last 20 years at LSU worth it? It just might be. So I gave you a lot of information there. I don't think you're going to get that rant from maybe anybody else other than somebody like Matt Moscona, somebody who covers LSU and knows that program inside out. Listen, I don't know what Will Wade is going to do. What I do know is that information is pertinent. The governor of Louisiana wants him. The AD who fired him is out. And to use a bad basketball pun, I think the ball's in his court. What does he want to do? Is it realistic? Is it not? Again, it's not what I would do. It's not my opinion on which job is better. I'm just telling you, when the governor wants you, when the governor pushed for you a year ago, it's something you got to think about. Again, assuming that LSU is willing to spend another $20 million on a basketball coaching transition, of course, just months after they spent quite literally hundreds of millions on a football transition. All right, LSU, that job is not quite open yet. But, by the way, so let's just get to this really quick. Will is making 2.5 at NC State. No way, you have to pay him 5. Listen, I'll just be quick on this. I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is it's a $5 million buyout to get him out of his contract. Maybe you're not doubling his salary, but he's not coming for, is he going to leave for the same salary? I'm just saying, I don't know. Listen, I'll be honest. I want him to stay at NC State. I think he's great in the ACC. I think he's great as a thorn in the side of UNC, Duke, etc. I'm just telling you, we have to talk about this as adults, and I hope I'm wrong. I want Will Wade to be at NC State. I don't know if that's going to happen. All right, let's take a break. One more. When we come back, wrap the show with another very interesting coaching carousel thing. By the way, what does this mean? Buddy doesn't know how a buyout works. This is all I do for a living, the Beastie Boys. I guarantee you I know more about buyouts than you do. Anyway, sick brag by me. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll wrap the show. I want to talk some other coaching carousel stuff. Syracuse is open. I think it's already down to 2 or 3 guys. There's an interesting story on Arizona State as well. We'll get to that. Quick break. Yes, I know about buyouts. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. Do want to start with a little bit of a mea culpa. Was a little mean to the Beastie Boys before we went to the break. I see, he said, you don't know what a buyout, how a buyout works, buddy. And I said, Beastie Boys, I know what I'm talking about. Now, I was all mean. I'm sorry to Beastie Boys. I woke up at 3:30 a.m. today at the Mint in Kentucky to drive to Nashville to get back to L.A. So the Beastie Boys said he wasn't talking to me. I apologize to Beastie Boys. I feel bad. Really quickly, again, apologize to you, Beastie Boys. I should mention, because it is March, you just saw it in the ad there, but our March is for Day Drinking t-shirt. This is the shirt that you need to have for the opening week of the NCAA tournament. You're going to be hanging with the boys. You're going to be chilling. Grab one. Limited supplies. You can see the QR code there. Also, aarontorresonline.com/shop. AaronTorresOnline.com/shop. You can get yours there. We appreciate your support of the Aaron Torres pod, but this is the shirt that you need for next week and the start of the NCAA tournament. All right, let's go ahead and wrap the show. Like I said, coaching carousel is really going to ramp up. There's actually been quite a few noteworthy from a power conference level jobs that have opened. Boston College is open. Georgia Tech is opened. I'm blanking on some other ones. Arizona State, we're going to talk about in half a second. To me, though, probably not only the most noteworthy job that has opened, but believe it or not, maybe the most noteworthy job that will open did open on Wednesday, and that was Syracuse. So Syracuse opened the ACC tournament on Tuesday. They lost to SMU. And afterwards, Adrian Autry was fired. 3 years, 0 NCAA tournaments, 2 back-to-back losing seasons. And listen, this isn't to crap on Red Autry, okay? But it was a situation where, 0 head coaching experience, takes over for Jim Boeheim. Jim Boeheim doesn't want to leave. It's this weird deal. I don't even necessarily blame him. But it was clear that not only was he not the right guy, but also that, you could not bring him back for another year. We all saw the pictures of the Carrier Dome by the end of the season. It was completely empty. It was a ghost town. It's bad enough to get 5, 6, 7,000 at an ACC game. It's even worse when you get 5, 6, 7,000 in a 40,000, 50,000 seat football stadium. So it was bad. It had to happen. Whatever is the next in his career, I wish him luck. But Syracuse opens, and I'll be transparent. I think there is a possibility that this is the biggest job that opens this entire season. We don't know what's going to happen, but you look at the major jobs. Mark Pope, doesn't matter how the season ends. He's not going to be out. Certainly Bill Self could retire. I still lean towards that not happening. Mick Cronin, who knows? Maybe Mick Cronin does something crazy and gets himself fired. But I think it feels like Syracuse is going to be the biggest job that opens. And I'll tell you this, I am not, so for a Syracuse fan or anybody watching that's not familiar with me, I am a UConn alum. I am not somebody that wants to see Syracuse fail, okay? So I am an old school Big East guy at heart. Listen, I love Butler, and I love Creighton, and I love DePaul, but I'm old school Big East. I'm UConn, Syracuse, UConn, Georgetown. I'm Georgetown, Syracuse, whatever. And what I would say is Syracuse is a great program with crazy passionate fans. I'll tell you this, still to this day, one of the most intimidating environments that I have ever stepped into as a person who loves college basketball is a big game at the Carrier Dome. When I was a student at UConn, when I was a undergrad, whatever, in the mid 2000s, we used to go up to Syracuse. And I remember going into a game and there had to be about 36,000 people at the Carrier Dome. And if there was 35,000 people, about 34,000, 500 of them were wearing orange. And you're one of a couple hundred people wearing UConn Huskies gear, and you're just trying to, survive the day. And I don't mean that as Syracuse fans are not nice people. I mean, it is a crazy, intimidating environment. And so I want to see this program succeed. By the way, little side note, I was at the 6 overtime Syracuse UConn game. I was at the Jerry McNamara buzzer beater over UConn in 2006. So I've seen this program at its best, and I want it to get back. And so with Red Autry out, I think this is a very unique situation in Syracuse basketball history because it is essentially the first coaching search that they're basically doing in any of our lives. Remember, Jim Boeheim got the job in the mid-1970s, okay? So you now have to be close to 60 years old, and I'm not trying to age anybody, and if you do remember the last Syracuse search, God bless you. I hope you're doing well and whatever. But it has been since the 1970s that there's been anything resembling a search. And even then, Jim Boeheim was promoted from within. And then, of course, most recently, Red Autry was promoted from within as well. And so Syracuse is an interesting job. It is now open. Now, what I will say is there's 2 variables that are very important with this Syracuse thing. One, they don't technically have an AD right now. Now, I will say it's earlier on Wednesday, Pete Thamel was the first one that I saw reported. I don't know if somebody else had it first. If they did, I apologize. But Pete Thamel was the one that I saw. He said that Syracuse is closing in on an AD. It is a gentleman by the name of Brian Blair from Toledo, who quote, let's see, no, I take this back. The Syracuse and Brian Blair have agreed to terms to make him the Syracuse next athletic director. So I stand corrected. It is 11:42 Eastern time. Syracuse officially has an AD. I thought what was interesting about what Pete Thamel said, though, was this. Blair brings a reputation as a fundraiser, a strong football background. It comes from an athletic department that won 13 MAC championships in his tenure. They were the first MAC school with a collective and a full-time executive for NIL strategy. Now, one, admittedly, that's a little bit of a, some agent probably sent that to Thamel to put out, but it is noteworthy, right? Because Syracuse is not a program that is totally flushing cash. This is not, we know what the schools are. This is not Texas A&M. This is not, from a basketball perspective, Kentucky or BYU. Now, I think with the right coach, I think they can be very competitive in NIL. But they need the right coach, and they need an AD that has that background. And so it sounds like this guy has that background. And that's the other part of it is whoever they hire, NIL is going to be a big part of it. It's all that matters in this era. And I do think it'll be noteworthy. Like, can you get those boosters re-engaged? Because this has been, not a very robust NIL situation. So that's what happened with the Syracuse coaching or with the Syracuse on Wednesday. Now, what I want to do is talk about 3 candidates because in my mind, I'll just be totally transparent. Listen, you're going to see lists of 5, 10, 20 guys, whatever. I think it's essentially down to 3 guys, maybe 2. I can't see it going further than 3, okay? So the first guy, he's the guy that everybody wants. It's Josh Schertz, the head coach at St. Louis, okay? If you know anything about it, Josh Schertz, you can see him on the screen, longtime D2 coach, crushed it there, goes to Indiana State, crushed it there. He's now at St. Louis. They are 27-4, spent most of February ranked in the top 25. Even if they don't win the A10, they're going to get an at-large bid. And I'll say this, hell of a coach, man. Like, one, forget the win-loss record. If you watch them, I think the thing that's crazy about St. Louis, they look like a high major team. I mean, I know everybody knows the Robbie Avila kid. Don't focus on him. I mean, they got athletes upon athletes upon athletes. Amari McCautry is a guy that could step onto a power conference floor tomorrow and be a starter and difference maker. The three-point shooter, I'm blanking on his name. He transferred from Virginia. He's like one of my favorite players in college basketball. And I can't even remember his stupid name. Islan or something like that. Why am I blanking on his name? It's going to kill me, so I'm just going to do it now so St. Louis fans don't get mad at me. It is Ishan Sharma. That's it. Sharma was the guy I was thinking of. Anyway, came from Virginia, baller. So Josh Schertz could bring guys with him and have immediate success. I think the thing that's going to be interesting about him is this. St. Louis is very well set up from a mid-major perspective. Okay, they're publicly trying to get into the Big East. They have poured a ton of money into that program, and I don't think Josh Schertz wants for anything at St. Louis. And so you look at what's going on at St. Louis right now. They have a lot of money in that program. He's going to get whatever he wants if he wants to stay. I think it's noteworthy. They play in Chaffetz Arena. The guy whose the building is named after is still very much alive and very much contributes to the university and has a B in front of his net worth. He's a billionaire. So I'm just trying to say, like, St. Louis is really well set up. We'll see what happens with Syracuse. We'll see what happens with Providence, any job. But I don't think it's crazy to think that Josh Schertz is back next year because he's got it really good at St. Louis, and it's not going to slow down if he stays there. And oh, by the way, other good jobs are going to open up next year, and he will be a candidate a year from now at other places as well. Think it's interesting. It's already been reported, Kansas State kind of reached out. He said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not really interested. So I think he can be picky. Now, if he wants to be the Syracuse coach, it'd be great for me because I think he'll be awesome right away, and it'll be fun to watch. You'll get 30,000 people in the Dome. But he's the first name. I think the second name that everybody needs to know is Brian Hodgson, right? So Brian Hodgson, of course, was Nate Oates' longtime right-hand man. Really helped recruit those great Alabama teams, including 2020 when they had the number 1 overall seed. That was Charles Bediako part 1 for those of you scoring at home. He's an awesome coach, okay? So he was under Nate Oates. He goes to Arkansas State for 2 years. By year 2, they win 25 games. This year, he goes to South Florida in the American, first place in the American, and they're in pretty good position to get the auto bid out of the American. Now, we'll see what happens, but the American is set up. It's one of those conferences where the top 2 seeds get the however many buys it is into the semifinals. So he's only got to win 2 games to get the auto bid. But you look at what he's done. Success at Arkansas State, goes to South Florida year 1. He has them as the regular season champs. And so to me, this is the kind of profile of the guy that you want in this era. Can he recruit? Yeah. Can he turn things around quickly? Nobody wants the dude saying it's a 3-year process. No. It's a 1-year process for the guys that know what they're doing. And so he, to me, is much more attainable than Josh Schertz. And for people who don't know his background, he's from upstate New York. So, everybody says that every job is their dream job. I don't know Brian Hodgson well enough to speak for him, but my guess is that if you asked him or, you got him alone, he probably would say that Syracuse is his dream job. He grew up in that area. He knows what it can be. And I think he checks all the boxes. He's going to be able to raise funds. He's a very good networker. He recruits his butt off. I think he has a chance to be very good. And then the last name, and maybe it was a name before Tuesday, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. Jerry McNamara. So for those of you who haven't been paying attention, Jerry McNamara, it was a Syracuse legend. I think you probably remember that. I was thinking about this, 2006, Jim Boeheim at the press conference, wouldn't have won 10 effing games without Jerry McNamara. Still an all-time great press conference quote. But he was a longtime Syracuse assistant. He goes to Siena. And if you missed it on Tuesday night, Siena won the MAC championship, and he has coached Siena to the NCAA tournament, Siena's first NCAA tournament bid since 2010 in year 2 for him. And so what I would say is this. I think because he made an NCAA tournament, there's going to be a big push. You have to go get him. I don't know that I necessarily believe that. First of all, and this is not a dig at Jerry McNamara. He's super young. He'll have another chance to get this job at some point, I would think. I guess if Hodgson gets it and he kills, he could be there for 20 years. But I think there's too often the push of you have to hire the guy who has the ties to the school, who's the local legend. And it's sure, but we've seen what happens when you rush that process or that guy isn't the right guy. And so what I'm talking about is Mark Pope. The Kentucky ties only take Mark Pope so far. At some point, you got to win. And the resume, I think we can all agree now, was a little bit spotty in hindsight with him getting the job. Patrick Ewing, how weird did that get? Red Autry, how weird did that get? Chris Mullen, how weird did that get? And so I don't think you can default to, well, Jerry McNamara made the NCAA tournament, you have to hire him. Now, I think if you go through the process and you feel like he is the right guy, if Josh Schertz says no, you say, and you like Jerry McNamara, Brian Hodgson says no, you like Jerry McNamara, then yes, I do think you should hire him if you think he is the best candidate. I don't think you should put him to the top of the list solely because he is a Syracuse alum and Syracuse legend who has a team in the NCAA tournament. And again, it's only 2 years as a head coach. If this was year 8 and he was coming off his 6th NCAA tournament, that's different. But and I'm not rooting against Jerry McNamara. If he ends up being the guy, then that's cool. I just don't think Syracuse should force a hire just because the guy is a one-time program legend. So we'll see what happens. I can't imagine it really gets past the top, those 3. I think if it does get to McNamara, there will be a big push. I know this for a fact, some of Siena's boosters, if you will, are basically Syracuse guys that are just want to support Jerry Mack. So we'll see what happens. The other names, listen, I've seen people argue, could Mike Hopkins, if Mike Hopkins gets this job, just shut down the program. I'm not trying to be a jerk. He was the coach in waiting for Jim Boeheim. He ended up leaving for Washington. He was basically a disaster there. Don't go get Mike Hopkins just because he's a name you know. And the good thing is hiring an AD who is not from the Syracuse family, I think to me makes it less likely that hire happens. So I would, call Josh Schertz. If he says no, I think Brian Hodgson takes it. I think that's where it ends. If both those guys say no, I would be comfortable giving it to Jerry McNamara. And by the way, maybe there's somebody else that's really good out there that's really interested in this job. I still think it's a good job. And I want Syracuse to be good. I want a reason to go back to the Dome. I want a reason to go eat dinosaur barbecue up there in Syracuse. but they got to make the right hire. But I think they will. And I think they'll get back to respectability, right? I mean, it only takes one hire. That's the positive. Look at NC State with Will Wade. Look at Virginia, Ryan Odom, 27-4 in the ACC. It can be done. You just got to make the right hire. All right, Matt, before we get out of here, any interesting questions, comments in the chat? I haven't had a chance to really look, so let's take a look. You good, Aaron? Okay, the Beastie Boys, NC State fan here. We will do everything we can to keep Will Wade here. If you missed it, Torres got a little grumpy. I thought the Beastie Boys was criticizing me. You were not the Beastie Boys. You're the man, and I apologize for just chirping at you. Like I said, I was at the Mint last night. Couldn't fall asleep till well after midnight. Had to leave about 3:30 to catch a flight back to LA. So thank you to Beastie Boys. Thank you for your patience with me. I was a little grumpy there for half a second. Anything else, Matt, before we go? Aaron, have you ever been on KSR? Would you ever go on? I hosted KSR a few times back in the day. Matt goes on vacation every summer, and he used to have me on as a fill-in host. He has all, he has the part of my take guys. He has whatever. I would be happy to go on if he invited me. I'm not going to beg. I think I'd be pretty, I know I was very good at it because everybody always had great response. So this was probably about 5-6 years ago that I used to do it. So yeah, I mean, listen, I'll say this, Jake, if you want to hear me on KSR, remember Matt, every summer before he goes on vacation, he always does the tweet of, hey, I'm going on vacation. Who do you want to see? We've got Myron Metcalf booked this day. We've got part of my take booked that day, blah, 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 this and that. And so I just bring it up because if you want to hear Torres, if you want to see Torres, that's the spot, tweet at him, let him know when he puts out that tweet. I've done it before, but it's been a few years. Anything else before we wrap? Is that basically it? How did you know I wanted that shirt, Torres? Which shirt? Is it the Marches for Day Drinking t-shirt? Which shirt are we talking about here, Pam? I don't think it's the Hope for Pope shirt. I'm sorry. I'm guessing it's not the Hope for Pope shirt. March is for day drinking. That is the shirt I think Pam is talking about. This is one of our hot sellers right now. Order today. I got to make a run to the post office tomorrow. So it will go out tomorrow. You'll have it in time for the opening round of the NCAA tournament. You're sitting there. You're drinking with the fellas. If you're Pam, you're drinking with your girls, doing whatever to watch the opening couple days of March Madness. March is for day drinking. You can get that t-shirt by clicking the QR code or AaronTorresOnline.com. Really quickly, let's see if there's anything else that jumps out to me. The Beastie Boy says my government name is Frederick. I will refer to you as Frederick. Oh, I'm so behind on this chat here. Siren says recruiting updates. I think it's probably a little early for recruiting, unless because the portal doesn't technically open until the day after the NCAA championship game. Now, I will say this, probably, we'll try to get a members only mailbag up maybe this week, maybe next week. I'm already hearing some portal names, but I do think that there's a couple things. Is one, what you got to remember is the portal doesn't open. We know that. But two, the portal isn't open for a while, but I think the portal names that you're going to want to focus on, and I keep saying, let me put it this way. I keep seeing all of these Kentucky burner accounts just screenshotting random guys and we got to go get this guy and we got to go get that guy. If you feel like your team needs players in the portal, what you should focus on transparently is the players for schools where the coach is either was fired or is going to get fired. So Arizona State with the Diop kid who's 7 foot is a monster. You want to focus on him. The Mustafa Thiam kid who went for 18 and 16 for Cincinnati today, that's probably a guy that's attainable. Jameer Jones, Providence. Stephon Vox, Providence. The big guy from Providence whose name I'm blanking on. Those are the guys you want. Donnie Freeman, by the way, from Syracuse. They just fired their coach. These are the guys that you should be focusing on. We will probably do another members-only mailbag either later this week, maybe next week. By the way, if you are not a member, you can always sign up. Just click the Join tab. We do at least one members-only mailbag a week, exclusive content. It helps support the show weeks like this where we've been on the road. All right, it's about midnight Eastern. think it's probably time to get out of here, right? Is there anything else to add? I think it's probably time to go. So I think we'll get out of here. Fun show, busy show, time to roll. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. Pam says she needs a guy. She's been divorced for 15 years. Pam, you should have came to the Mint. Should have came to the Mint on Tuesday night because a lot of single guys hanging around the gaming hall at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. So we would have loved to have you. I know you tried to make it. Pam, I love you. But anyway, all right, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll come back on Thursday night. We're going to have to do these night shows. It doesn't make sense to do morning shows when the games start at noon Eastern. So we'll be back Thursday night, full episode. Obviously, Sunday, post-selection Sunday, we will have another show. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure to put on the notifications. We